Okay. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Principal Liner Notes podcast. This is Sean Gaylord, and I am very grateful and honored to have Andrea Holzwarth with us. And there's so much to say about Andrea, but I will say she currently serves as the Senior Director of New District Engagement with Project Lead the Way. In the biz, we call it PLTW. And the new district engagement team is dedicated to supporting new schools and districts as they implement PLTW. Andrea is passionate about bringing STEM and career learning opportunities to students across the country, and she is based in Kansas City. And sometimes every Sunday, we talked about a little bit about this before, maybe a little bit of Chiefs action, maybe. Kind of, sort of.
Yeah, absolutely. When you're based in Kansas City, you have to be a Chiefs fan.
Absolutely. So we wouldn't have it any other way. I'm a Patriots fan, but we'll just leave it at that. But anyway, Andrea, welcome to the podcast. It's great to have you here.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. Excited for our conversation.
Awesome. We have a few rabbit holes that we're going to go down, and maybe we'll trade notes on some morning workouts and what version of Little Mermaid is better, the live action or the animated.
Yeah, absolutely.
So in terms of I remember when we collaborated a little bit at my last school and working on a grant opportunity to bring Project Lead the Way to my last school. For those who may not be familiar with Project Lead the Way, what's the elevator pitch?
Yeah, absolutely. So PLTW, or Project Lead the Way, is a pre-K through 12 STEM curriculum. We have pathways in biomedical science, computer science, and engineering. And we really provide that wraparound STEM experience for students and for teachers. We do provide professional development for teachers and that really structured project-based learning. That is really at the core of all that we do. So we support teachers, we support students. And I supported you as an administrator as you were getting that kicked off the ground. But we really work in that kind of transformational STEM education space.
Awesome. It really is a transformational opportunity for students. So in terms of your journey and background as a student and an educator, what led you to the path to bring you to this point with Project Lead the Way?
Yeah, so I will kind of go backwards. I started right out of college. I attended Wichita State University in Kansas for my undergraduate. And after college, I actually started working for Wichita State in the College of Engineering. And I had gotten a taste of what it was like to work at a university. I did one of my internships in my undergrad for the Office of Admissions to really recruit students and what that looked like. So after college, there was a new position at our university at Wichita State around the College of Engineering. And the goal at the time, or my goal, was to not only work with students to have them attend Wichita State, to choose to attend Wichita State, but to major in engineering. And the idea behind that was in Kansas at the time, there was some state funding that was available for colleges, all the colleges of engineering in the state, to get more students into the workforce of engineering and STEM, because we knew that at a certain point we're going to hit a drop off just because of the retirements and things along those lines. So we needed more students in the pipeline. So worked there for about 5 years and really saw the value of students getting interested in engineering. But one of the things that we really looked at when we were working on a recruitment plan was we saw that Project Lead the Way students were some of the best to recruit to the College of Engineering because they had already had some exposure and experience in engineering. And PLTW is a rigorous program, especially in the high school level. And so they had had some of that grit and tenacity that it takes to get through an engineering course in high school. And then as we did some more research at the university level, is that we realized that they also persisted to graduation. So not only did they choose to major in engineering when you're a freshman, which a lot of people may do that, they would actually persist to graduation. So we do really focus in on PLTW students, and that's how I originally got connected. I had never heard of PLTW before that until really realizing kind of the support that Project Lead the Way was providing to students. And then just based on my background in education, how much I saw it was so valuable, I really wanted to impact more students and impact them before they chose a four-year institution. Because I firmly believe in education, but I also believe that you don't need a four-year degree to go out and be successful in the world. And so one of the things I wanted to do was start working even younger in the K-12 space. It's also hard for students to just say they're going to major in engineering if they've never had exposure to engineering or STEM.
Yeah.
So that was kind of how I got connected to PLTW, and have served in a variety of roles during my time at PLTW, but now really focused in on the team I work alongside is really focused on supporting new schools and districts as they choose to implement Project Lead the Way.
Awesome. Now, I know in the having taught or been an administrator at every level, elementary, middle, and high school, typically when you say the word engineering, in a faculty meeting, and people either have, the math teachers or the scientists or the CTE folks are like, yeah, bring it on.
Yep.
That's our wheel space. But then there are others who go, well, I'm a history teacher. I have to get to the Civil War by November, or I am a kindergarten teacher, and I have to, I'm on a tight schedule. They've got to learn. They have to have number sense and know their words and be able to write by such and such date. I don't have time for engineering. There's no way. Or you have administrators possibly, and maybe even some teachers are going, listen, I am in a low performing or underperforming school. I am held accountable for test scores. I don't have time. This engineering thing, that's great, wonderful. Project Lead the Way, great, but I need to work on project getting my test scores up, or I need to work on project, just survival. So how do you navigate through those kind of naysaying, and those, not maybe, it's just kind of, those are legitimate concerns and issues. So how do you navigate and say, hey, listen, engineering is a pathway, or that mindset is necessary. How do you build capacity for that?
Yeah. So I agree, 100% valid concerns. Those are, there's no one that says STEM education is not a good thing. Everybody wants to do it. It's just like you said, there's barriers in place. And a lot of times it's kind of our self-imposed, when I say adult imposed, I should say, barriers because of time and scheduling and things along those lines. So the things that we do on our team to really support some of that work is really just kind of looking at what we're already doing and how can you bring in PLTW or bring in STEM education in some ways so that's not just another thing. It can be embedded in the work you're doing. And the thing I also like to always share is STEM education builds critical thinkers and strategic thinkers and problem solvers. And that's exactly what you want your students to be able to do in every other area that you're teaching as well. So really, we just talked about that, like how can you, I'll use PLTW as the example, embed some of the work we do. There is some math involved in PLTW. There's some reading and English language arts in there. There's writing. All of those things can transcend across the full day. It doesn't have to be, okay, now it's PLTW time. PLTW can be embedded at every subject area.
Absolutely. And when you say that, I'm thinking of, and I won't, I promised you I would not do any music. I wouldn't put you on the spot for music trivia.
Thank you.
but I think about, as you know, I'm a music geek, and I have a little bit of a love for this band called the Beatles, this kind of small bar band that came out of Liverpool, and they recorded a couple of songs. You may have heard of them.
Just a couple of,
just a couple. But on one of their most famous songs, Strawberry Fields Forever, And when, as you were just sharing this, Andrea, I just thought immediately of that, where when John Lennon wrote the song, there's two versions of Strawberry Fields. There's a slow version and there's a fast version. And he couldn't really make up his mind which version he wanted. And so he went to the producer George Martin and said, listen, I like the first part of this version and I like the second part of this version. I want them both in the song. And
Mm-hmm.
George Martin, the producer, just said, listen, I can't, it's impossible. I can't figure it out. They're in two different keys. And he kind of gave all these kind of, reasons why he couldn't do it. And John Lennon said, well, you can figure it out. And George Martin did. He was, I won't get into all the technical aspects of the song, but he was able to fuse both of those songs together. And when you say that, and talking about Project Lead the Way, I think about mindset, right? That's one thing I remember when we talked early on, when we were working on the grant and just the research I had done is, and you made it very clear, yeah, there's a program and there's stuff that goes with it, but we're trying to infuse a mindset, into the schoolhouse. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that kind of mindset, that end game, that end goal, in with Project Lead the Way in kids.
Yeah. So most people may think that our goal is to have more, produce more engineers, produce more computer scientists, when really that's not necessarily the goal of PLTW. Our goal is to get more students interested in STEM so that they have options that they can opt in wherever they choose to do, whether it's middle school or high school. We're talking in the elementary space. But one of the things that's really crucial to PLTWs in the elementary space, especially, is the fail forward mindset. So I think we had talked about this originally when we just were getting to know each other and talking about Project Lead the Way. I always use myself as an example. I was that straight A student. You tell me exactly what I need to do to get an A, and I'm going to do that.
Mm-hmm.
There was never a lot of open-endedness in my education. It was do this to get this result, and I would do that because of work ethic or whatever it was. I wanted that A. Project Lead the Way is not like that. It's very open-ended. And so students are going to fail. And actually, the students who struggle the most with Project Lead the Way in the beginning are those students that are just like me, that tell me what I need to do to get an A, because the teacher is the facilitator of the learning in a PLTW classroom. They're not the sage on the stage. They don't have all the answers. There's every student can be doing the same project. They can all start at point A and get to point B, but the middle is very different for all of them. And so really learning fail forward. And I love visiting PLTW classrooms, and I'm biased. My favorite is elementary classrooms, just because really seeing the spark of education for them. And I just remember being in a classroom, and one of the students, I asked them, what happens when it doesn't work? And they just said, well, you reiterate and you go back to the design process. And it was just, wow. First of all, they had that vocabulary,
Yeah.
but second, they knew that it was okay to fail, and they would just redesign.
That's so powerful, and how inspirational that you got to kind of experience that firsthand. And it is, and it's difficult. It's a difficult mindset to sustain in some cases,
Mm-hmm.
because we are so built for this kind of metric of success, right? Like, getting the A, or getting the blue ribbon, or getting the 95% proficiency, scores, and all of those things. So it not only this kind of fail forward mindset is not only necessary for students to have, but that's also got to come from school leadership. That mindset has to be nurtured by that mindset has to also be nurtured by teachers. So how does Project Lead the Way help teachers and school leaders kind of open up to that? Because again, there is this kind of high stakes testing accountability thing that we're in right now. Even in the post COVID world, right? The days of grace, those 2 weeks of grace that we got during COVID, very quickly went out the window. So how do you help teachers, how does your team help teachers and school leaders open to that? I mean,
Mhm.
I'd love for everybody to listen to Strawberry Fields Forever, but and to get that example or tune into the podcast, because I do talk a lot about that kind of
Yeah.
mindset. But how do you all do that with Project Lead the Way?
Yeah. So one of the things that we do, especially at my team of new district engagement, is we're working with schools who have never had Project Lead the Way before. So that is their first introduction. And just like you said, all these questions are valid and real. And so we have to support them in that and understanding the value that not just PLTW, but STEM can provide to students. One of the things that we like to share is that PLTW and STEM education, again, I mentioned it earlier, but critical thinkers, strategic thinkers, all of that, problem solvers, that's going to assist in test scores. It will. When your students can solve a problem, they can do well in that aspect. One of the things that we do with our professional development is help teachers understand that project-based learning approach. And we have our approach. It's called activity, project, problem-based, or APB. It's really tightly scaffolded project-based learning, but we train them in that approach when they attend professional development with us to get comfortable with it, be able to take it back to their classrooms with their students. A lot of times I also talk about if you have one or two teachers who are maybe piloting PLTW or just getting started with it, maybe they're in a specials rotation. Students
Mhm.
go to art, they go to PE, they go to STEM. So you may be on an island doing that kind of work by
Yeah.
yourself. And so what we do is we encourage them, hey, there are some activities and modules that you could actually do with your team as maybe one of the back to school days or one of the PD days. And I know those are always filled as well, but that's a great way to kick off and understand what students are going through. And then the other side of that, the administrators, which is I talk to a lot of administrators about that what you're going to see in a Project Lead the Way classroom is not what you're going to see in a typical classroom. It's going to be messy. It's going to be
Mhm.
loud. Your teacher is not going to be the sage on the stage, and your teacher is just going to keep asking questions to students. If a student comes up to a PLW teacher and says, "Is this right?" or "How do I get to here?" It's let's talk about that. How do you think you can get there? Like, it can be a little bit different to a typical classroom. And so what we've done is we want to support administrators so they can support their teachers. We develop professional development just for administrators to see what it looks like, support
Mhm.
them in that, and answer kind of some questions for them. And one thing we've done too is this is relatively new. I don't know if we've talked about it much, Sean, but Project Lead the Way has developed a whole nother suite, if you will, of professional development
Mm.
that is not necessarily required to teach PLTW. So we know that there are teachers or administrators out there that would like to bring some hands-on project-based learning, professional development to their teachers, and maybe PLTW isn't right for them at that time for whatever reason. And that's okay. We do have professional development for teachers and for administrators that aren't PLTW ready or whatever that looks like. So that's another way that we're trying to help get more STEM recognition, more project-based learning support out there without having to adopt PLTW.
Oh wow, that sounds really positive and inviting. I got kind of goosebumps on that stuff because I'm a lifelong learning geek,
Yeah.
and so that's neat. In you know, again, a music geek, no music trivia. I'm not going to put you on the spot, but I love. I'm always fixated on names of groups and organizations. I love a band name, I love the fact that you are the senior director of a department or a band in this case, or a team that's called the new district engagement team. I just love the feel of that. Somewhat envious too, like, man, that's a band that I want to be a part of. So one of the things in the podcast, and one of the things that I talk about, and I know that it's important to you, is the ethos of collaboration, and I know that Project Lead the Way and the modules there um, encourage that, right, for kids and students. Um, how does that? How do you encourage collaboration with the new district engagement team? How does that work in the culture, or maybe the corporate culture of Project Lead the Way? I'm always fascinated by organizations and organizational hierarchies and how it aligns with vision and mission. And I know somewhere in Project Lead the Way strategic plan has got to be the word collaboration.
Absolutely.
So how does that work? How do y'all foster that? How do the grown-ups in Project Lead the Way foster that? I'm just curious.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that we do is hold ourselves accountable to, we say this quite often, especially in some professional development that we lead within our group, whether it's the new district engagement team or our full customer team, of does this look like a PLTW classroom? So it's very rare that we ever have meetings or professional development experiences that are sit and get, because that's not what a PLTW classroom looks like. So we can't expect our team members to have sit and get experience when our students aren't doing that. We want to be hold ourselves accountable to that same standard. One thing I will say is Project Lead the Way is a remote first organization. I've been working remotely my whole time at Project Lead the Way, and I'm nearing almost 7 years. So pre-COVID, we were also, some of our team members were remote. And so that adds a little bit of complexity to what that looks like of collaboration. But one thing we do is we collaborate really well, specifically on our new district engagement team and I think it starts at the beginning of the foundation of a team. We're a relatively new team at PLTW. We're about 2 years old in our I'd say maybe not relatively new anymore, but we were for a while. And just understanding what's our role on our team, like our full team in our entire organization. But then what's my role, as the senior director, what is my role for my team? And then we also look at each other's skill sets. Who has what skill set? Who does something really well? How can I learn from them? How could I collaborate with them? And so we do that often. At the beginning of building a team, you can do some of the structured thought partner work or structured collaboration. And I think the beauty of that is to step back, and once we've all felt comfortable with each other and have the trust, which is another really crucial piece to collaboration, is trust, team member trust. Once you have that, you no longer have to have structured collaboration. It's just there. And I think it is a little bit of a secret sauce on how that happens, but it really is trust is what has to be built on a team before you can collaborate. And especially in a remote first organization, you have to build trust with your team members.
That's so important, and I know we're remote now. For those of you that are on the audio version of the podcast, Andrea and I are not in the same room. We're in two different parts of the world. I'm in North Carolina. You're in Kansas, so it's different. But you have to, I guess, and that trust is key, and it's hard to do that in a room, it doesn't have to be hard, but I'm sure that there's a level of challenge that you have to do to build to invest in that trust. And I think part of that is the time, right? And invest in each other's time. And I'm sure there's some sort of virtual happy hour or virtual, things that you all do to build that trust and to build that community. But that is, when you have trust, then you have psychological safety. When you have trust and psychological safety, then you have synergy, and then when you have synergy, you have momentum. Hence the new district engagement team, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when starting this team 2 years ago, we had to build that trust. We all were on a new team. We hadn't necessarily worked together. We worked together at PLTW before, but not necessarily on our team. And so you have to start from the ground. You have to commit to time to say, hey, we're going to take time to do a retreat or a couple of days or whatever that looks like to develop our team. And I think that's where sometimes organizations can just say, nope, we're going to hit the ground running. We have goals. We want to do this. We want to do that. But until you've built a team, you can't do any of that. You may have some success initially without it, but eventually that team will crash and burn because there's no trust, there's no collaboration, there's no communication. And I think that's just crucial to any foundation of a team.
I know a Project Lead the Way, and is a pathway for students to embrace opportunities and the real world, and you do that through the STEM mindset, which we've talked about, or the engineering design process. And Project Lead the Way has their process and mindset that they do. But I also know too, I'm going to assume that in order to make those learning experiences authentic, it has to reflect and connect to the real world. Well, the real world as we know it is in a constant state of shift, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the last 3 years have really been a testament to that. Remote, if you and I were to talk about remote work and what you just described, the new district engagement team 15, 20 years ago, it was non-existent, right?
Yeah.
So how I guess maybe two-part, I have a two-part question for you. The first part is, what are those kind of skills that you see that the real world is looking for, or the corporate world or real world
Mm-hmm.
is looking for in it for students? And then the second part of that is, and you can answer in any order, is how do y'all stay on top of that in this world of constant shift, right?
Yeah.
I mean, think about all the 21st century skill sets that we were talking about 20 going on 30 years ago, and it's
Yeah.
different now.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and I think the skills that employers are looking for, that we want our PLTW students to be prepared for, that obviously we want them to have the engineering experience and computer science exposure, biomedical science, but really what employers are looking for are critical thinkers, problem solvers, communicators, collaborators, which is exactly what is taught in a PLTW classroom and through engineering and computer science and biomed. And so that is really at the core of all that we do, is building that for students, because any employer can teach a skill set, right? Teach a technical skill set. Students can learn technical skill sets, but what's going to make them adaptive? And that's
Mm.
the problem solving, the strategic thinking. That's what's crucial. And what we do at Project Lead the Way, we have a whole team devoted to our development of our curriculum. We call that our programs team at Project Lead the Way, and they are industry professionals. They have either been in the field, have been educators, really a mixture of team members on that team. And so they do a lot of work in collaboration with our classroom teachers. What are you seeing every day? What does that look like? But as you know, based on some of the grant funding that you received, we also
Mhm.
have really high caliber industry partners. RDOG
Yes.
Group, Lockheed Martin, John Deere, Chevron. They are committed to Project Lead the Way because they see us as workforce development, like our students
Mhm.
are workforce development. And so we're always going to them and bringing them a part of those things, of developing curriculum and what that looks like, of how can we put problems in our curriculum that are real world, that are relevant, that they also see as real world and relevant. And we ask them often, what do you want from us, a new hire? Like, what do you look for when you're hiring? And yeah, it's the technical skills for sure, but it's also everything else that we just talked about, the adaptive mindset.
That's a question I often ask when, if I go on a field trip and we go to a business or a corporate place, and I've been fortunate to have been principal at a CTE school, and when we would do those kind of
Yeah.
field trip kind of things, I would always ask, as an educator, what is it that you want me to help deliver to you at the end? So those have got to be fun conversations. I mean, John
Mm-hmm.
Deere and Lockheed Martin. I mean, those are big time, corporate partners. RDOT, another big
Yeah.
time corporate partner. So I bet you those are really fun. It's just a geek in me. Those are really fun. Those are fun conversations to have.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And one of the things that I appreciate about Project Lead the Way is we're always evolving.
Hmm.
We're not staying stagnant. That's one of the things I actually always share with if I'm hiring for a team member on my team is, how do you feel about change? Because PLTW is an ever-changing organization, and that's what's helped us stay relevant over the last 25 years. But that's one of the things I always say too when I talk to schools is the curriculum and the experiences your students are having today will not be the same that they're having in 5 years or 3 years or whatever XYZ number of years, because we're always adapting developing and making it better based on what's happening in the world around us.
Through that, what would you say, Andrea, is for you the most rewarding side of your work? You touched upon it a little bit at the beginning, when you talked about visiting elementary schools, but what are those things that give you warmth and validity to your why as an educator, as senior director of the new district engagement team?
Yeah, I think I always like to share this by sharing a story. So,
Nice.
Project Lead the Way, I've worked with hundreds of schools, thousands of teachers and administrators in my time with Project Lead the Way. And I see the value, I see what we're doing. And that's what gets me excited about coming to work every day is I can help impact students and teachers and administrators as they do some of that change. But a couple of years ago, I was in a kindergarten classroom in a Kansas City area school district. And, the questions I always ask are tell me about your project. How is this different than what you normally are doing? Tell me about your robotics, whatever that looks like. And in this kindergarten classroom, I was talking to a female student and I had just asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? And she said, with so much confidence, which I loved, was I want to be a ballerina and an engineer because my mom told me that I could do both.
Nice.
And that was just like, wow, that's my why right there. Because one, a lot of things to unpack there, but a
Mhm.
kindergarten female student knew what an engineer was. She knew she could do both of them, or she knew
Hmm.
she could be an engineer. She could picture herself as an engineer. And two, she knew that she could also be a ballerina. She didn't have to choose either or, which, obviously you're kindergarten, you're dreaming big. You can do both those things. Real
Right.
world, maybe not necessarily, but I just loved that she was able to do that. And the why she was able to know what an engineer was, that she could picture herself was because of Project Lead the Way and the work that they were doing in that school. So that's really what gets me excited. And visiting classrooms is one of my favorite things to do, to see it in action.
Mhm.
Like I said, I worked with a lot of administrators and teachers, but really seeing Project Lead the Way in action and seeing the power that it has that can change a student's life, can also change the trajectory of their life.
Right.
As students are, learning these skills, they can really go wherever they want. Project Lead the Way is a catalyst, can catapult them wherever they want to go in life. And I think that's really crucial. And one of the things that we had talked about too, Sean, is I'm really passionate about, it doesn't matter what your zip code is, you should be able to have access to PLTW.
Right.
And because it is life changing, it can take students potentially out of poverty. It can take them and their families out of poverty with the work that we're doing once they are graduating high school. It can take a student in rural Kansas who has no idea what an engineer is to learn that skill set, and then they could go wherever they want. They could also come back to their rural community, which I'm a rural community graduate, and they could change their community. They could be a change agent for that community.
Mhm.
So um, that's a long-winded answer, Sean, to say like really the impact that we have on students is what is my why I come to work every day.
That is not long-winded at all, Andrea. And the key word there, several things. One, that's a TED. What you just said is a TED talk waiting to happen. Two, for those of you that are listening to the podcast right now, whether or viewing the podcast right now, that's a rewindable moment right there. NPR has the driveway moments. Um, this is what I call like the rewind moment. So like go back 90 seconds, and what Andrea just said, you need to put in bronze someplace, and then the key word from that is catalyst. And I believe this, and man, I'm thinking back to our initial conversation, a couple of years ago, because when I think I don't know who landed there first, but I remember, you talking about the notion it doesn't matter. This is not something that's reserved for someone on a certain echelon or
Mhm.
socioeconomic status. That's what attracted me to y'all's universe. And I've often said that, and being somebody who is a very proud Title I principal and school turnaround principal, that our kids should be able to get to do the cool stuff. And
Absolutely.
often we go down the path of remediation and workbooks and worksheets and those things because of that mindset. But here, again, it just gives me, you're inspiring me, with what you just shared. Like, we are a catalyst, and you just never know, whether it's that module or some part of that module or some part of Project Lead the Way, that if a child is exposed to, it's going to inspire, her or him to be a change agent, for, or to
Yeah.
see images of possibility, so that, man, I can be a ballerina and an engineer, and I'm just getting started, and I don't know what else
Yeah.
is on the other horizon. Wow.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other thing too, I know we were kind of focused on students in that aspect, and that's really what I'm passionate about, and see it very often. But the other side of the work that Project Lead the Way does that also drives me and makes me excited is how we support teachers in that. So I've visited a number of classrooms, like I'd mentioned, and there is just a couple of teachers, but one really stands out and to me is she had when she admitted, she came talk to me when I visited her classroom, and she said, "Hey, I went to PLTW training and professional development, kicking and screaming. I did not want to go. I was told I had to go. I didn't. I've been doing the same thing that I've been doing, and I loved it. And I had to go to PLTW training. That's what I was told, is I had to go." She said, "I just wanted to." I went back. I think it was like 6 months later, she went back to her administrator, and she had apologized for, not having the best attitude to go in, which, you know what, that's a real feeling. And that's a valid feeling to have, of going to professional development. You may not have wanted to. I get that. But her experience with our professional development and then teaching PLTW and seeing what's happening for her students, she said it transformed the way she taught. And she actually had already submitted her retirement, and she actually said she took it back. That PLTW gave her that shot in the arm, got her excited about being in education again, and she wasn't ready to retire. So
Wow.
it was just one of those things that we talk a lot about students, and absolutely we are transforming students' lives. We are also, I firmly believe, transforming teachers' lives, because we're giving them the professional development that is there, but also support, the skills, the knowledge, the confidence, everything they need to teach STEM education, which may not be something that they were exposed to or really even excited about before. So definitely a twofold kind of why, or what makes me excited.
That's true. I mean, we are in the midst of a teacher recruitment and retention crisis.
Absolutely.
And there are many pathways to help solve that problem. And, whether be it collective efficacy, and or what have you, or building teacher leadership, um and to be able to empower teachers and to provide that support. I mean, that's a powerful, um leg to stand on,
Yeah.
and, in service of teachers who need that inspiration or need that catalyst as well, to either stay
Mhm.
in the profession, or to be a part of the profession, and what have you. And I know, and I keep missing this opportunity. But I know Project Lead the Way does. You do have a national conference or summit, right? Is that?
We do. Yeah. So it's every 2 years we host our summit, which is our national conference. We invite all of our educators, our administrators, those who are just seeking PLTW, want to test the waters, see what it looks like for their students. We were in Orlando last year, and we'll have our next conference. Trying to think of my years here. Fall of 2024, we'll be having another conference. It'll be on the West Coast this time. We try and, be nice to both sides of the
Yeah.
U.S. But yeah, it's a great opportunity to learn more, to really just connect. And I think that's the power of PLTW, is our network. We've
Mhm.
trained over 80,000 teachers, probably closer to 90,000 now. And so there's 90,000 teachers across the country that have that same mindset, that have been in that professional development. So we don't have a conference for 90,000 necessarily, but virtually they can definitely be connected in that.
And if we think about 90,000 teachers, and then you think about, gosh, the hundreds of thousands of students impacted, and how this catalyst to be a change agent for the world. It's very inspiring, and I'm grateful for that. How can folks get connected with you and Project Lead the Way? Where are the entry points to be a catalyst to change the world with Project Lead the Way?
Yeah, we try and make it pretty easy. Just for Project Lead the Way, if you're interested in learning more, it's really simple. It's just PLTW.org. On our website, we have a number of different resources. You can download all of our unit outlines, modules, take a look at it, all of our standards, connections. But one of the things that I always like to highlight too on our website is we are a research-based organization, so you can take a look at that. You can also take a look at some of our partners and the work that we've done. And I can't remember if I mentioned this earlier or not, Sean, but Project Lead the Way is a national nonprofit organization. So we are not for profit. We are here to support schools across the country. And one of the great things with our partners that I mentioned, like Ardagh, Lockheed Martin, Chevron, we are also 100% pass-through rate. So anytime that those organizations or industry partners come to Project Lead the Way and want to fund schools, 100% of that funding goes straight to schools.
Yes, I can attest to that. And there are a lot, I mean, and that's key. I want to emphasize and amplify that is for those of you who are tuning in and thinking about connecting, which I do encourage you to with Project Lead the Way. But it is a nonprofit, and it's a national nonprofit, and there is no, and I'm very finicky about groups. And I think Andrea remembers a little bit of me. My little hardball, like, listen, I don't believe in exploiting kids, exploiting schools. And there is a high level of sincerity and community support that's coming from Project Lead the Way. And the only return that they want is doing what's best for kids, doing what's right for kids, for all kids.
Absolutely.
I can really attest that, because I have a sincerity barometer that kind of goes on in my head. I could use a stronger term, but this is a G-rated podcast, and we want to keep it that way. But I do have a sincerity barometer that I kind of go by, and I'm still talking to Project Lead the Way and Andrea, and I'm grateful to call you a bandmate and friend. And if folks want to connect with you directly, I know that you have a presence on Twitter, and you have a presence on LinkedIn. So how can folks follow you there?
Yeah, so both LinkedIn and Twitter, I try and make it pretty easy. It's just at Andrea Holzwarth, my name. I try and share out some resources related to STEM education, obviously share some Project Lead the Way information, but want to be a resource outside of just PLTW, really just STEM in general.
Absolutely. And I will say this, friends, and those tuning in, when we talk about thought partner in the truest sense of the word, and I know folks throw that word around a whole lot, but having had past opportunities to thought partner with Andrea, she truly is a thought partner, and just a great person that builds that trust and builds that psychological safety, and really keeps you kind of focused on how to do what's right and what's best for kids. And even though we may differ on NFL teams, I got nothing against Kansas City. I've never been to Kansas City, but still, I have some bias, and there is a little bit of music in Kansas City.
I was going to say, you need to come visit. We'll get you some barbecue. Lots of great barbecue in Kansas City, but also some great jazz. So
I need to do that. If I'm not mistaken, isn't that kind of Ted Lasso country as well?
Absolutely. When you were mentioning the Beatles, I actually just watched one of the Ted Lasso episodes last night. So, yep, Jason Sudeikis is actually from Kansas City. So if you are a Ted Lasso fan, like most of Kansas City is, you will see lots of Kansas City connections. And I also feel very personally connected because the very first episode, season 1, he was the Wichita State University football coach,
Alma
which Wichita
mater.
State does not have football. But yes, my alma mater was on there. So I'm sure that that's exactly what they were thinking was my connection.
You know, again, if we could, we should do Ted Lasso's Running Man dance. We're not going to do that right now,
Yeah.
because I know you are rebuilding your bionics right now.
Yeah, I don't
Uh,
know if my surgeon would want me to be doing that right now, but yeah, we could.
but you are an inspiration, and I'm grateful for you. So, folks that are tuning in, I am utmostly grateful and sincere about connecting with Andrea Holzwarth. Please follow her on Twitter and LinkedIn. Please check out Project Lead the Way. It is an organization that is putting their heart where their action is for kids, to be that change catalyst for kids, to help them change the world. So now I def now and notice, Andrea has just kind of raised the gauntlet, thrown the gauntlet down on a Kansas City visit. So yeah, I may have to take you up on that one day.
Sounds good. We'll have a whole visit planned for you.
Awesome. Um, Friends, thank you so much for tuning in to the Principal Liner Notes podcast. This is Sean Gaylord. And as I often close the podcast with, don't forget to share with the world your dreams and your visions and your ideas, because the world needs them. And you, just like that 5-year-old future ballerina and engineer, are going to change the world. And you help make the world a better place. Andrea Holzwarth, you help make the world a better place as well. Thank you so much for coming by.
Thanks for having me, Sean.